Good afternoon, students of Mrs. Monroe. I am Mr. Monroe, and she has asked me to go over parts of Romeo and Juliet Act 2 with you. You might ask why she would ask me to do that. I can tell you that I'm a retired teacher from Abilene Independent School District, and that for 28 years I taught Romeo and Juliet at least once every year in that span of time. So I feel like it's possible that I will be somewhat of an expert in the field regarding Shakespeare and specifically Romeo and Juliet. So I want to start with Romeo and Juliet Act 2, Scene 3, because I feel like you've gotten a summary for Act 2, Scenes 1 and 2, and the prologue. It's important to note that there's only a prologue for Act 1 and 2. I don't know if that's because Shakespeare got tired of writing prologues or if he thought maybe we didn't need an introduction to the rest of the play. Maybe we got our feet under us and we figured it out now. But there's only a prologue for Act 1 and Act 2. In Act 2, Scene 2, you saw Romeo and Juliet meet up again. And actually, by the end of that meeting, after Juliet gets over her surprise at finding a strange person in her garden, they have decided that they'll get married the next day, which is really surprising considering the fact that Romeo had gone to the party at her house to see Rosalind. And of course, saw Juliet, and the rest is history. So in Act 2, Scene 3, it takes place in Friar Lawrence's cell. You have to be careful. The cell just means a small room. It doesn't mean that he's in prison. But he's actually outside of his cell. It's early in the morning, and Romeo has not been to bed. He did not go to sleep. And his first thought is to go running to his confidant, the person that he sees as his spiritual guide, Friar Lawrence. This is the first time we meet Friar Lawrence in the play. You have not seen or heard of him before this. We have met some of Romeo's friends. You met Mercutio, who is Romeo's kind of crazy friend, who is also kin to the prince. And you met Benvolio, the guy that kind of grounds Romeo, his cousin. We'll see him again in a little while. But Romeo decides he wants to go see his friend Friar Lawrence, and you can guess why. The word friar means priest. He's a Franciscan monk, which is why we see him outside gathering herbs and spices early in the morning. This is sort of what Franciscan monks do. He'd be out in nature with the animals and with the flowers and the plants. And what's interesting is that in this long soliloquy, and it's long and it's hard to follow, and don't worry about it. Nobody really understands it until they've read it for 28 years. But there is one line that's very important, actually a couple of lines. Friar Lawrence is expounding upon what it means, what plants mean, and why some plants are poisonous and some plants are medicinal, and he then begins to start talking philosophically about humans. And he says in line 21, virtue itself turns vice. That means sometimes something that is meant for good turns bad when misapplied, and vice, sometimes by action, is dignified. In other words, here's a priest who seems to believe that sometimes what you intend for good can be bad, but sometimes what is intended or is seen as bad can actually work out for the good. That doesn't sound very priestly, but it sets him up for what's about to happen. Because here comes Romeo, all excited after having spent an evening with his new love, and he comes running in, and Friar Lawrence sees that he's got, weeds and twigs in his hair, and he looks like he hasn't slept all night long. And Romeo comes in, and after he sees him and talks to him, Friar Lawrence says in line 41, "Or if it be not so, then here I hit it right. Our Romeo has not been in bed tonight." And of course, that's true. Romeo answers, "That last is true, the sweeter rest was mine." And Friar Lawrence immediately misunderstands what he means by that and says, "God pardon sin was thou with Rosaline." Now, it's important to note that even Friar Lawrence knows who Rosaline is and is, well, he's afraid that Romeo has finally succumbed to, or he's actually gotten Rosalind to succumb to what he wants her to do and has spent the night with her. And Romeo, of course, is quick to tell him, no, that's not what it was. The following line he says, "With Rosalind, my ghostly father, no, I have forgot that name." And that name's woe, to which, of course, Friar Lawrence is all excited because he's been trying to get Romeo to forget Rosaline for some time now. And then Romeo says the strangest thing. He says, I've been feasting with mine enemy. And we know what that means, but Friar Lawrence has no idea. Where on a sudden one hath wounded me that's by me wounded. Again, Friar Lawrence looks at him. He sees no injuries. Romeo is talking about Cupid's arrow, of course. We know that. Both are remedies within thy help and holy physic lie. Well, how can Friar Lawrence help Romeo? How can he heal his wound? Well, we know what he's here to do. He's here to ask him to marry him. And then he goes on down after finally, Friar Lawrence says, this is a riddle. Stop talking in riddles, Romeo. It's too early in the morning. Tell me what you mean. And Romeo says, I'll tell thee as we pass. This is line 63. But this I pray, that thou consent to marry us today. Now, of course, Friar Lawrence, who's been talking to him about Rosalind for the last however long and how he needs to get over this puppy love, is very upset by this urge, this wish, this sudden passion for a completely different girl that has led to him wanting to be married today. Romeo, he says, you still got a tear on your cheek from Rosalind? I can still see one. And now you're telling me you're in love with this other girl and you want to get married today? And then down on line 80, here's another one of the themes of the play. Friar Lawrence says, women may fall when there's no strength in men. However, Romeo talks about how, you told me I needed to get rid of Rosalind, let that love die. And Friar Lawrence says, not in a grave, another one out to have. Finally, at the end of the scene, and this is very important, Friar Lawrence says, this is line 90, in one respect I'll thy assistant be, for this alliance may so happy prove to turn your household's rancor, that means hatred, to pure love. So Friar Lawrence seems to believe that if he does something wrong, that it might turn out to be for the good. That he can do this thing, this marriage behind the parents' back, and in the end, if these two kids basically say, we're married, mom and dad, there's nothing you can do about it, that all of a sudden the feud will go away. Well, we know better than that. However, that's what he says. And then Romeo says, oh, let us hence, I stand on sudden haste. And Friar Lawrence says another one of the lines that is a theme from the play, wisely and slow they stumble that run fast. Well, I don't know how you could be running any faster than marrying two people who only met each other the day before, whose families are mortal enemies, and marrying them that afternoon. But that is exactly what he says he will do by the end of Act 3, Scene 3.